would be able to sit under the tents and have some food. Thanks. Amazing work to get us all together and organize this. Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure. To start off, Paul, you came to hear this. I hope you can. You were the king of the Shotwells. Because of you is why we're together. A few months ago, Kay and I met, my cousin, in Oxford and Shotwell, and we came to the Baptist church to see our grandparents pray. We didn't think we had any other relatives except for Tom, our cousin in Florida, and Jane, our cousin in Texas. We were very small. We needed some family. So at the Baptist church, one of the ladies said, just down the road is called Shotwell. He's your cousin. Cousin? This is great. So we walk down, knock on the door, nobody comes. The curtain moves, but nobody comes. So I said, Kay, somebody's in there, but they don't want to see us. She said, well, try again. So we tried again, but nobody would come. So I said, we'll walk back to the church. We'll write a note with the cell number, and if he wants to meet his cousins, he can call us. So I wrote a note, we walked back down, Kay stayed in the car, I went to the side of the house, and there was Paul, sitting in his wheelchair with a gun pointed at him. And I go, whoa, man! Holy cow, he looked at me and he said, Annie died. I said, I don't know. He said, come in. I said, I'm not sure. So I called Kay and we came in and we sat down and that's how this all began. So he told us about all of you and the wonderful Shotwell family we had that we didn't know. And then Kay went and met Karen and Raleigh, and from there, this was the gathering. So Paul, we thank you, and I've got a few more things for Paul. First of all, this is a ball because we're having a ball, Paul. Thanks for you. And this is so we can always find you in the dark because I never know what you're going to have, Flora. And last but not least, here's the gun to use, Paul. This would be okay. We're so glad to be here. So glad everybody came. Here's Kay.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, that was really an experience. So she said Annie Dyer, that's her mother. So he looked at her and thought that was her mother. That's what happened. So at least he knew who we were. We believed him, right? Okay, let's bow our heads.
I was asked by Karen and Tom to do this little piece.
Hold it up to you.
Hold it up.
Hold it up to your mouth.
Close, really close. Okay. I'm Van Kutz, and nice to see everybody here. Karen and Tom had asked me to do a little bit on the Shotwell family tree history, and I don't really know that much about it. I've done a little research on my own family, the Kutz family, starting back in the 1970s, but I've learned a little bit here and there. But anyway, it's good to be here for the first ever Shotwell family reunion as far as we now know. I don't think there were any further back in time. And they asked me to make sure that you did sign this, that you put your name and your address and telephone numbers and whatever else information is asking for on this, so we can have a list of everybody that's here today. Okay, well, you're going to have mine because mine's on the handout I'm going to give you. But emails would be great, yeah. I'm going to do a little bit of work on the, first of all, let me tell you this, how I'm related to the Shotwells. My mother was a Shotwell. Her name was Willie Mae Shotwell, and she married my dad, Howard Isaac Kutz. And Mama's daddy, of course, was Henry Ray Shotwell, and we always call him Granddaddy Ray or Ray Shotwell. And she had 5 brothers and sisters, and we're going to tell you a little bit about those a little bit later. But I thought that the best way to start this was to show you a little information up here on this bulletin board. I don't know if all of you can see this or not. At the top of it, it has the name Archibald and has the date 1767, which I think is the birth date of the great-grandfather of Taylor Shotwell. And I'll talk a little bit more about him later. And then underneath, I call these the two branches of the Shotwells. You have Thomas Ladd Shotwell, born 1822 on this side, and I'm in this line. And then there's another Shotwell called James Shotwell. And there are some of you here today, by the way, he was born in 1816, we think, but there are some of you here today that are in line with him. The grandchildren of Aunt Annie Shotwell and Uncle Tom Shotwell are in line with James Shotwell. And we'll give you a little bit more information about him later too. But the first thing I want to do is to give you like a little handout. That's the teacher part in me. A little visual aid and give you a handout. And Fan and Karen, would you help on this? Oh, Karen said to tell everybody that she and I are double first cousins. Her mom and my mom are sisters, and her dad and my dad were brothers. And Karen, Fan, here's some more. I thought rather than just telling you about all these people and quite a few dates, that it would be better if you saw what, or you see what I'm talking about. And I've got some pictures too that relate to my presentation that I'll share with you a little bit later. Some of you have already come up here to see them. If you'll look on the first page when you get this, I'll wait till everybody gets a copy. Because there's enough copies for everybody, children included, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Because there are some people that didn't get to make it today, I think. And Paul needs one to make sure he gets one. For those of you that have just gotten this, at the very top is my name, my address. We're from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. And I say North Carolina because there is a Rocky Mount, Virginia. And then my house telephone number is given there. My mobile number is given there. And I would love to hear from any of you anytime, except too late at night, of course. And my email address is there. Please feel free to email me. And it would be neat for you, everybody to give his or her email address. That would be a neat way to stay in touch with everybody. And I don't think on that sheet, Karen, that was requested, was it?
Yeah, it's going around. Whoever,
Okay.
somebody over there has it.
All right, so if you have not put your email address on that sheet going around, make sure that you do that. Okay, again, these are the two branches of Shotwells.
I think it's pretty.
And Paul, did you want to come over here on this side to see it or stay with it? Okay, he's going to stay with that. And we're going to start with the James, and I've got a question mark, Shotwell first, of 1816. Now, what I'm about to tell you is actually from a little booklet, I guess that's the best word, that was put together in 1971 by a man who used to live here in Stovall. His name was Earl Spicer. The Spicer family, and there's some notes down below on that, the Spicer family moved into Stovall, I think, around 1895, and Fan, you may know more about this than I do. She used to work in the genealogical section over at the Thornton Library in Oxford. But Earl Spicer came back to Stovall sometime in the late 60s, early 70s, and I think it was about 1971. And of course, Fan Cutch Montague, my cousin, we had a grandmother, Sally Wilson, that was interviewed, and Karen, her grandmother too, were interviewed. They interviewed her for this little book. The little book is called Some Historical Facts About Stovall. And in it, there is a section on families that lived in Stovall from way back, right up to the time that Earl Spicer did this little booklet. And I've got a copy of that book. The copy that I have came from someone else's copy. And I think that J.G. Harris had a copy at one time, and I don't know whatever happened to that. It burned in the house. But I got my copy from one of my dad's aunts that lived here in Stovall, Miss Daisy Cutts O'Brien. But anyway, if you'll just read down with me here. Now remember, we're dealing with the right side of this bulletin board up here, James Shotwell. In 1841, Mr. Spicer says in his book, a James Shotwell married a Rebecca Hart. Now, the middle initial of this James Shotwell, I have seen it as James H. Shotwell, and I've also seen it as James A. Shotwell. And you know that Archibald name is mentioned in many different generations in the Shotwell family. So it could be James H., and I don't know what the H stands for, or it could be James A., which would probably be Archibald. He married a Rebecca Hart, who was the daughter of James and Rebecca Graves Hart. And all of you people from Aunt Annie Shotwell, Uncle Tom Shotwell side, you know that Graves is a prominent name in that family. James and Rebecca settled in the Puckett home place. For those of you that don't know where that is, if you're leaving Stovall, going on Highway 15 toward Bullock, about 3 miles north, going toward Clarksville, Virginia, I believe it's the last turn on the left as you're leaving Stovall, and you go down this long road, used to be a dirt road, and that's where James H. or James A. Shotwell and his wife, Rebecca Hart, lived. And how long they lived there, I don't know. And I'm not even sure about any kind of information relating to where they are buried. So maybe some of you do know this. So James Shotwell would probably have been born in 1816. He is mentioned, I think, in some of the early censuses. I'm not exactly sure of which one, but I think I've seen it somewhere. Now, James and Rebecca, as I said, settled in the Puckett home place, and it's interesting that they settled there because Fan and Karen and myself, who are Cut's cousins, our parents and our grandparents actually used to live over at the Puckett place. And I'm not sure that it's really called the Puckett place anymore. It's still called the Puckett place. The man that used to own it is long since passed, Ulysses Puckett, who used to be a prominent citizen, resident here in Stovall, and was a pharmacist here in Stovall for a long time. But anyway, let's go back to James and Rebecca Hart. They had 3 children, and those children are Elizabeth, who married a Mr. Knott, and I don't know much about them or her, and then John Graves, and I believe it's Kay, where are you? No, not Kay, but Carol. Where are you, Carol? Carol just showed me an old copy of, was it the Oxford Ledger? The Oxford Ledger before all this got underway today. And it's about John Graves Shotwell, and I forgot exactly what it's all about. It was a long article. But anyway, maybe she'll share that with you later. And the other child was James Archibald. Now, James Archibald is very interesting. He was born in 1847, and you're welcome to make notes on this. This is your copy. And he died in 1917. He is buried over at Elmwood Cemetery in Oxford, right there on the corner of Hillsborough Street and, what is it? 96, the road going out to 96. It's right on Hillsborough Street. It's right where the old Oxford Hotel used to be, right on Hillsborough Street. And then they made a bank there. And then the cemetery is right there next to that. And there's some very old grave sites in there. But anyway, he's buried there. And I've got a copy of his death certificate. And I was told that somebody was going to bring some artifacts that maybe belonged to James Archibald Shotwell. He was in the Confederacy. Okay, Carol says that she has his bandana and that was his. And she has some letters that were written by him back to members of the family when he was stationed where in the Civil War? In Arkansas, okay. Well, anyway, he's buried over there. And as I said, I've got a copy of his death certificate, which I have just gotten hold of in the last few days. The guy that took Fan's place over at the Thornton Library in Oxford, Mark Pace, actually found it for me, and we picked it up on Thursday. He said, tell you hello, by the way. Okay. All right, now remember those 3 children, Elizabeth that married Mr. Knott, James Graves, and James Archibald. Now, James Graves married a woman called Mary Lyon. Okay, and we have somebody here today that is a descendant of this particular person. John Graves married Mary Lyon. Their children were Annie Shotwell who would later marry Tom Shotwell, and Mary Shotwell, whom I believe was never married. Referred to as Miss Mary. She lived in Oxford, and I believe she died there about 1971, somewhere in that period of time. So remember now, this is John Graves. Okay, John Graves and Mary Lyon had 4 children, and their descendants are here with us today. They had a daughter named Annie Dye that they referred to as Dee. She married a Mr. Evans. They had a daughter named Mary Lyon, who married a Mr. Reynolds. They lived in Goldsboro. They had a daughter named Dorothy, who married Seymour Satterwhite, who, by the way, is related to Fan, Karen, and myself through the Cutstein. And then they had a daughter named Margaret, who married a Mr. Roan, and I believe she moved to Florida. And her son, Tom, where are you? Okay, this is Tom Roan over there to my left. And Tom, you live where now? Lives in Gainesville, Florida. And Jane, where are you? That's Jane Battle, and she is the daughter of Dorothy Shotwell, who married Seymour Satterwhite, and from Texas. Mary Lyon married Mr. Reynolds, and her daughter is here today, and there she is. It's Kay Setzer. Annie Dye married Mr. Evans D, and her daughter is here today, and that is Carol White. So we're still talking now on this side of the bulletin board. The left, the right, your right, my left. Okay, now let's get down to James Archibald. So we've taken care now of John Graves. We've taken care of Elizabeth. I don't have a lot of information about Elizabeth that married that Mr. Knott. But then James Archibald married some woman by the name of Elizabeth Mangum. I believe that they had one child, and they named that child Elizabeth. Now correct me if I'm wrong, those of you on this side. I believe the mother and the daughter were named Lizzie.
Okay, yeah. Evidently, James' mother did not like the woman he married, and I think she died very young in childbirth. And so Elizabeth was brought up not by her, but by my grandparents' mother. And she said only on the condition that she believes she's my daughter and not yours. So she grew up all these years thinking he was her uncle when he was really her dad, and they lived there. Yeah. So she was Lizzie. So she was treated as a sister of Annie and Mary, but she was actually their cousin. And then so I think she found out later in life, and it was really quite a shock.
Yeah, I'd heard that story, but I didn't know whether I was supposed to bring that up or not, so I'm glad that she did. Okay.
Doesn't matter anymore, man.
I believe that I've seen in some census that she is listed as a sister of Annie and Mary. Right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Your grandmother, Annie Shotwell, you call Nanny, she referred to James Archibald, who married Elizabeth Mangum, as Uncle Arch. No, Uncle Arch. Yes, I've seen that. Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. As I said, this is your area, not mine, so you probably know a lot more about it than I do. But the last little item, and remember, all of this is coming from Earl Spicer's little book. Robert and Elizabeth Shotwell's only daughter was Betsy. All right, now this is the Elizabeth that was the daughter of James Archibald and Elizabeth Mangum. Their daughter Elizabeth actually married. Let's go back to the bulletin board. She married one of the Shotwells on this side. So that is probably the first, if not one of the first times, that the two sides are brought together. Robert Shotwell was my granddaddy Ray Shotwell's brother. It was his older brother. And I've got a picture of him. And he married this Elizabeth Shotwell, the daughter of James Archibald Shotwell and Elizabeth Mangum. Both Robert Shotwell and his wife, Elizabeth Shotwell, she was a Shotwell, married Shotwell. They are buried at Elmwood Cemetery in Oxford. So all of their graves are over there, and they're listed also on the Oxford Cemetery website. I forgot what it is. It's a website you can log on to that tells you all the people that are buried over there. And all of these people are listed. So that takes care then of that side. Now turn the page. Turn the page. Now at the top of page 2, you have information starting on this line of the Shotwells. So Karen, Jenny, Wayne, Jim, Holt, myself. Am I leaving anybody out? Oh, Martha, and Martha's sister, Marion. Yeah, okay. Martha's over there today. But all of those people that were just mentioned, plus Martha's sister, Marion, who lives in Memphis, Tennessee, and couldn't be here today because she's on jury duty and couldn't make it and get back in time. We are in line with this man, Thomas Ladd Shotwell, born in 1822. Now, I'll go back to this Archibald up here a little bit later. There's some questions that I have about that. Maybe you can help me. But just read along with me here. Thomas Ladd Shotwell married Mary Jane Smith from Abram Plains. He was born in 1822, died in 1909, and she was born in 1826 and died in 1914. She is buried right up here in Shotwell Baptist Church Cemetery. I've seen her gravesite up there a couple of times. And her husband, Thomas Ladd Shotwell, that we're in line with. I hope I'm getting this right, Fan. He is buried here in Shotwell on the hill adjacent. When you go down Little Mountain Creek Road, get up here on Highway 15, make a left on the Little Mountain Creek Road, go down the road a little ways, and up on the left side of the road, there's some wooded areas, some hills up there, and I believe that his gravesite is up there. I've never seen it. David Stovall. Daddy took me up there one time, and we couldn't find it. But David Stovall, a guy that lives in this area, he says that he knows where it is. One of these days, I'm going to get him to show it to me. But that's where we believe that Thomas Ladd Shotwell is buried. He was born in Virginia. He was not born in North Carolina. And he died in Vance County, the next county over from where we are now, Henderson being the county seat. Now, I have a picture of Thomas Ladd Shotwell and his wife, Mary Jane Smith Shotwell. It's kind of interesting about Mary Jane Smith. And we have a big picture up here of that too. Karen is showing it now. This happens to belong to Karen and Tom. And the pictures that I have actually are copies from an old tin print that a lady here in town gave me many long years ago. Ms. Annie Gill, who by the way used to live in the same house that Aunt Annie Shotwell lived in at one time, back right over here on Durham Street. This house is still there. Man, was that the Methodist or Presbyterian parsonage?
The Mayans. Well, no, it was the Baptist. The Baptist preacher lived there too.
The Baptist parsonage.
It was the
Yeah,
Baptist
Baptist
parsonage at one time? Okay, before the new parsonage was built. Okay.
Mr. Bradley.
Okay, well, as I said, Mary Jane Smith was from Abrams Plains. Now, if you want a really interesting trip, got some time, take a trip up to Abrams Plains. The place, I think, originally dates back to the 1700s, way back, and was like about 3,000 acres of land plus at one time. Okay, what you do, get back on Highway 15, make that same left onto Little Mountain Creek Road, and up about a mile or so, it forks one to the left, one to the right. Take the right, and you're on what's called the Grassy Creek Road. Grassy Creek is where my wife, Bonnie Timberlake Cuts, who is here today. There she is. Her parents still live up there. And went about halfway up that road, on the right side, there's a little sign that says Abrams Plains. That's where Mary Jane Smith was probably born and raised. Her family was a very prominent family. And Fan and Karen and I, our grandmother Cuts, whom we call Manny Cuts, our parents' mother, she used to tell me that she had heard that Mary Jane Smith came from a really prominent family, and she always bragged that she never had to work because they had slaves to do all the work, and it was up in Abrams Plains. Now, it's interesting that Mary Jane Smith and Thomas Ladd Shotwell, they have several children, one of whom is James Archibald Taylor Shotwell. Now, Taylor Shotwell was the name everybody called him, and he was also born at Abrams Plains. He was born at Abrams Plains. So go back to your sheet, and the next thing you're going to see would be Thomas and Mary Jane Smith's children. Okay, they had several children. One's name was Margaret, and I believe that Margaret was the oldest. Margaret died in childbirth in 1893, and I have her original obituary as it came from the paper. The day that she died. And Daisy O'Brien gave that to me. All right, Margaret Dorothy, and you see the names being repeated now? Jane, this is where your mom probably is picking up her name from. Margaret Dorothy Shotwell married a man called William Henry Cutts. That's Fan, Karen, and myself's great-granddaddy Cutts. That was his first marriage. And our granddaddy Taz Cutts was one of her 3 children. She had another child by the name of Macon. And by the way, Taz and Macon are both buried up here in Stovall Baptist Church Cemetery. And then there was a 3rd child. And I never actually saw her. Granddaddy Taz died before all of his grandchildren were born. He died in 1942. Our oldest Cutts cousin, Fan's brother, Tommy Cutts, didn't even see him. He wasn't born in 1943.
No, but he died
Prior to Tommy's birth.
He's not going till November, and I think Granddad Taz died in spring.
Okay. But anyway, I wanted to tell you that she was married to a Cutts, and this is the first time that I think the Cuttses and the Shotwells come together, with Margaret Dorothy Shotwell, the daughter of Thomas Ladd Shotwell and Mary Jane Smith Shotwell. I also have a picture of her. You can see this later if you can't see it now. She's standing by her first husband, our great-granddaddy, William Henry Cutts. They called him Billy. He was known as Billy Cutts. And he died about 1913, somewhere there. And also, he married again. Of course, this doesn't relate to the Shotwells, but I'll tell you anyway. He married again, our great-granddaddy, Billy Cutts, a woman called Lola Jane Hicks. So we Cuttses and Shotwells are tied up with Hickses, too. And I'll tell you about another family later.
You forgot about Mary Anna, who was
Okay,
Jane's
okay,
grandmother.
sorry. Thank you. Okay, the other child that they had was Mariana. This was my great-granddaddy, Billy Cutts, and Margaret Dorothy Shotwell. Mariana. Mariana married one Seymour Satterwhite. Mariana married
Clyde.
Clyde Satterwhite. Okay, and their daughter was Dorothy. Dorothy.
Seymour.
Seymour was one of the children. Okay, and then Seymour, of course, married Dorothy Shotwell, and Jane is a result of that marriage over there. Okay, let's move on to the next child of Thomas Ladd Shotwell and Mary Jane Smith. Rebecca Shepherd Shotwell married one of Woody. I think it was a Reuben Woody. I'm not sure where the Woodies. I think that she married a Woody, and I think it was Reuben Woody. And the other child was named Annie, and she married a Mr. Morris. And then there was another child named Rose, and she married a D.L. Woody. And I've got the obituary for that particular lady when she passed away. And then there was an unknown sister, and I believe that unknown sister died very early. I'm not familiar with that. And then there was and one brother, James Archibald Taylor Shotwell. And that's, of course, my great-granddaddy, Taylor Shotwell. He was the only boy in that family with those 4 or 5 sisters. Now let's get to James Archibald Taylor Shotwell. So we're still over here on this side. And he was called Taylor. I don't think that I ever heard anybody call him anything but that. Of course, he died long before I was born.
Did Paul know him?
He died in 1909. So Paul wasn't born until 28? Okay, as I said a while ago, if you'll read along with me, he was born up at Abrams Plains. So he was born in the same place as his mother, Mary Jane Smith Shotwell, and born and raised there. Born in 1849, died in 1909, and married a woman called Emma Gold Morgan. So here's where we come in with the Morgans too, and that's a whole nother story. I've been working on them off and on for years. Emma Gold Morgan married Taylor Shotwell on December 13th, 1877. That date is kind of iffy. I have seen an 1876 date. If anybody knows any more about that than what I've got, let me know. But this I got from some source, and I can't remember which. The man that married Taylor Shotwell and Emma Gold Morgan was called Joshua Addison Stradley. He was a very well-liked and famous preacher that lived in this area long, long ago. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was preaching at Stovall Baptist Church at one time. He's preached at Bullock Baptist Church, I think at Island Creek Baptist Church. And by the way, that's where Emma Gold Morgan Shotwell and James Archibald Taylor Shotwell are buried. My wife and I went down to their burial site this past Thursday. It's Island Creek Baptist Church. It's on a road called Stagecoach Road, which is off of number 39 going to Henderson. I believe that's the best way to put it. Beautiful church. The grounds are well kept up. I encourage you to go down there and see that. They have a really old, very interesting looking tombstone down there for the Shotwells. There are several Shotwells that are buried down there. But anyway, I thought that you might want to take a little trip down there and see that. That road, Van can probably tell you more about Stagecoach Road.
Williamsboro, if you know how to get to Williamsboro, North Carolina, it's about 3 miles from Williamsboro on Stagecoach Road. So you know more about how to come get
And
there.
that's an old road.
You go back.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Emma Shotwell before we get going too far. Emma, as I said, was a Morgan. And Emma had a sister. And by the way, I have a picture of both Emma and her sister up here. Emma had a sister by the name of Virginia Morgan. Virginia, that's where you get your name from. Your great-grandmother Hicks. That's my, Jenny, raise your hand. That's my first cousin on the Shotwell side. Her dad and my mother were brothers and sisters. We always called her Jenny. She's Niner Virginia Shotwell, and we always called her Jenny. But her name actually comes from our great-grandmother Hicks, who was Virginia Ann Morgan. Now here's the real clincher. These two ladies, Emma Gold Morgan, who married Taylor Shotwell, and Virginia Ann Hicks, who married Benjamin Thomas Hicks. We won't go there because the Hickses are very involved. Their mother was a Cutts. Her name was Susan Frances Cutts. And Susan Frances Cutts was our great-great-granddaddy Uriah Cutts' sister. So the Cuttses, the Shotwells, the Morgans, and yes, the Hickses are all tied up together. It's an interesting mixture.
And we're all just drooling.
And then we throw the Woodies in there too. The Woodies in there.
And the Woodies, of course, come in there. Yeah. Pardon? Yes. 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 My granddaddy Ray Shotwell is the son of Emma Gold Shotwell, And my grandmother, Grace Shotwell, is the daughter of Virginia Ann Morgan Hicks. See, Granddaddy Ray, maybe I shouldn't say this, I don't know. I'm going to say it. Granddaddy Ray Shotwell and Grandma Shotwell, that's Grace Virginia Hicks Shotwell, they were first cousins, which was kind of a common thing back in those days for first cousins to know each other.
Our mother was a Meisner, and they were kin to the Morgans on their side.
Okay,
And the Shop was kin to the Morgans on this side, so my mom and daddy were cousins too when they got married.
okay, the guy with the yellow shirt on that's talking to me now is my cousin Jim Shotwell, who, by the way, is named after one of Taylor Shotwell's sons, Baker Shotwell. He's James Baker Shotwell. Okay, onward. Now, Rob, these are the children of Taylor and Emma Gold Morgan Shotwell. As we've said before, there were 9 kids in that family. There were 5 boys and 4 girls. Now, I know you've all seen this picture. Here they are. These are the 5 Shotwell boys, and Taylor Shotwell is over to your far right at the top. They're not smiling, though. Okay, I'll tell you right now. Okay, let's see what we got here. All right. On the far left of that picture, on the far left is going to be Tom Shotwell. He's got his hair parted, wearing a bow tie. Come by and look at it later. And I noticed that somebody else had bought the same picture up here. Okay, let's go down and find Tom Shotwell while we're talking about it. He's the third from the bottom now. Tom Shotwell was called, his real name was John Thomas Shotwell. He married Annie Gray Shotwell on this side, remember. She's from this side of the Shotwell, so a Shotwell married a Shotwell. Pardon?
She called herself Annie Wesley.
I didn't know that.
And that's on the Thomas, their wedding invitation. It says Annie Wesley.
Neat. I didn't know that. Okay, well that's Aunt Annie Shotwell. But anyway, I got Annie Graves, also Annie Graves, but you say she called herself Annie Wesley? By the way, there's some neat pictures up here on the table behind me of Aunt Annie Graves or Wesley Shotwell. She was an extremely special person to me. I love her to death. She was always interested in higher education. And I went to ECU. Fan and I both went to East Carolina. And every time I'd come home from East Carolina, I'd go down and see Aunt Annie. And she said, well, what have you done this week? What courses are you taking? What kind of grades are you making? She was always a classy lady. Always very nice, very nice. Okay, so Uncle Tom is on the far left. The guy that's next to him is George Baker Shotwell, after whom Jim is named over here. Again, you have to see the picture. And then the guy next to him is Robert Shotwell. Oh, let's go back to Baker Shotwell and find the information on the next page for Baker. I think it's on the next page. It's at the top of the next page. George Baker Shotwell married Ellen Shanks. And these, I think, are their children. Taylor, who was supposed to be here today and couldn't come, Peggy, Mary, and Graves. Notice Graves is now being repeated again for the 3rd time. Okay, that's Robert. And Robert married Elizabeth Shotwell. Shotwell married Shotwell. And remember, Elizabeth was on the right side, and Robert would be on the left. So we're bringing the sides together for the 2nd time. And by the way, they're buried in Elmwood Cemetery over in Oxford. And then the boy standing up, that's above everybody else, is my granddaddy, Henry Ray Shotwell. And I don't know, Paul, did anybody ever call him Henry? No, he was always called Ray Shotwell. And that's him standing up. And I'm a little biased in saying this. I think he's the most handsome of all of them. But anyway, the little boy seated on Taylor Shotwell's right knee was the youngest of the 5 boys. He was called by family Collie. And I remember Collie well, because Collie lived with one of his sisters, Janie Ethel Shotwell, down in Vance County. And I remember that he, like a lot of those Shotwell boys, liked to smoke cigars and cock his hat just to the side, just like our granddaddy Ray Shotwell did. But Collie is buried right down at Island Creek, right beside of Emma Gold Shotwell and James Archibald Taylor Shotwell. They're all together, can't miss them. And then, of course, you got Taylor Shotwell on your far right. That's Taylor Shotwell. As I said, they all look very solemn here, but in those days, I guess people were not encouraged to smile or look pleasant, when they got their pictures taken. Okay, and I'd like to show you this. This is, these are the two sisters that we were talking about a while ago, the Morgan sisters. Grandma Emma, great-grandma Emma, she is on your left, the lady on the left. This was taken maybe shortly before she died. Grandma Emma died in 1944. Taylor Shotwell, her husband, died in 1909. She lived 35 years beyond his death. And she was buried at Island Creek Baptist Church in early July of 1944. She was a special lady from what I've heard my mama say about her. And maybe Paul can shed some light on Grandma Emma, can you? Can you shed some light on Grandma Emma, what kind of lady she was?
The only thing was that when it's time for to go to bed, she would say, blow out the lamp. And at the time, we had electric lights. but she would invariably say, blow out the lights.
I wish that I could have known her, but remember now, these two ladies, the one on your left, Grandma Emma, and the one on your right were sisters, and the one on your right was Virginia Ann Hicks, Morgan Hicks. And those two ladies were born sometime, Grandma Emma was born in 1859, and I think that Grandma Jenny was born maybe around the same time. And Kay's going to say something.
This story is from my mama. We had these little bitty chairs and small rocking chairs. I know you've probably seen them, but she tells the story of Grandma Emma sitting in the chair, and her long red hair would reach to the floor almost, and my mother just loved to brush her hair. So she was evidently beautiful.
My mom liked to brush hair too.
Yeah, her mom did.
Okay. Well, that's interesting that you should mention her hair color. So Karen and Martha, Jim and Holt and myself, we have an aunt who was Granddaddy Ray Shotwell's sister. She was never married. Her name is Edwina Thatcher Shotwell. She had red hair. And the reason that Grandma Emma and then of course Edwina had red hair is because red hair ran in the Morgan family. They were known, some of them, for their red hair. Now remember what I said a while ago about the Morgans. We're Fan and Karen, the Cutzes, we're really tied up with them because Grandma Emma and Grandma Jenny's mother was Susan Frances Cutts. And she has a beautiful tombstone down at Island Creek. If you've never seen it, you should go see that. And then Susan Frances Cutts, of course, was our great-great-granddaddy, Uriah Cutts' sister, one of his two sisters. But that's an interesting line to get into. And Fan and I are still exploring the Morgans. Off and on we'll talk about the Morgans. Going down a little bit. We've taken care of Robert Shotwell, known as Uncle Rob, who married Elizabeth. Their daughter was their daughter was Betsy. Now, is Betsy still alive?
No.
Betsy's gone. I remember seeing Betsy when I was a small child. I guess it was here in Stovall somewhere. I don't know. She was a musician. Where did she live? Was it Atlanta, Georgia? Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah.
Listen to that.
Right. And what was her husband? Something Dale? Lyle? Bob Dale.
Bob Dale.
Okay, we've done Tom Shotwell. We've done Carl Shotwell. His name was James Carl. And as I said, he lived with his sister. And her name was Janie Ethel Shotwell. And she married a Tippett. And I'll talk about her on the next page. And then Henry Ray Shotwell, the last one on this page. He's my granddaddy, Ray Shotwell. Unfortunately, none of us got to see him. We have in the Shotwell cousins, Karen, Jim, Holt, Jenny, Linda Grace. Linda Grace is deceased, and that's Jenny and Holt and Jim's sister. And we have another cousin who was the oldest cousin of the Shotwell cousins, Robert Ray Shotwell, and he passed away some time back. And of course, he got his name from his granddaddy, Ray Shotwell. Marion and Martha also.
You're in Dan, you're in doghouse now.
Get over here. She's on the wrong side.
Man, Paul was, I think, 13 when his daddy died.
Yeah, Paul was in his early teens when Granddaddy Ray died. And let me show you real quickly before Paul tells the story here of Granddaddy Ray Shotwell. This is Henry Ray Shotwell. As I said, nobody ever called him Henry to my knowledge. He was Ray. Check out his hat cocked to the side. A hallmark of those Shotwell boys. And he was born January the 28th, 1889. He died November the 6th, 1942. So, as I said, none of us Shotwell cousins ever saw our granddaddy Shotwell. Fan and Karen, here's Karen again, Karen and Fan and I, we never saw our granddaddy Kaz. I grew up, and they did too, without knowing either one of our grandfathers, either on the Shotwell side or the Cut side. Of course, you knew well, you didn't know your grandfather on the Royster side either, did you? Always felt like I missed a little something, not knowing my granddaddies. Here's Paul to tell you a story about the day that Granddaddy Ray, soon after he passed away, and where they were and what Paul had to do to get him to safety.
Yeah. I don't want to eat it. No, what it was, we had a cornfield, and we were down there pulling corn. I was, I was 14 years old, and when we got to put through pulling the corn, he went to sit down in the car, and he had a cerebral hemorrhage. And I finally got him out, pushed him over, and drove the car home. And he died that morning. When I went on to school, and he died, I believe, before lunchtime. They came and got me. He was only 53.
And Mama always told me, Mama, Paul's brother, Willie Mae Shotwell, she always told me that when Paul drove that car, that when he drove in with Granddaddy Ray, they could barely see Paul over the steering wheel. Is that right? That, of course, he was just 13 or 14. 14 years old. Of course, he didn't have his license, and he wasn't tall enough to really be seen over the steering wheel. But Mama always told me that. She told me that story over and over again.
And it was across the road. I just learned the other day, he was telling me. I thought it was behind where they lived, but it wasn't. It was across the road and down the road.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
He can tell you where it was.
Here is Henry Ray Shotwell's wife. This is Grace Virginia Hicks. Actually, her name is Virginia Grace Hicks. I've always been confused with that. It's Virginia Grace. She was named after her mother, Virginia Ann Morgan, who married B.T. Hicks, Benjamin Thomas Hicks. And she was a very special lady, too. She was born February the 24th, 1893, and she died August the 24th, 1959. I remember very well when Grandma Shotwell died. And Karen, I think that you and Sybil and Ed, y'all all lived together at one time. Talk about it.
Oh, no.
I wasn't supposed to do that. Okay, and I have her obituary here too, but she was a very special lady. They had several children, one of whom is in a chair behind me, named Paul Judson Shotwell, and I have a fantastic picture of all 6 of the children of Henry Ray Shotwell and Grace Virginia Hicks Shotwell, Virginia Grace Hicks Shotwell. And you can come up and look at this picture. Looking at this, the person on your far left, standing up, is my mother, Willie Mae Cutts. And then the person standing beside of her is her twin sister, Ruby Ray Shotwell Hudson. Her son is here with us today, Wayne Stephen Hudson. Wayne, make yourself known. Okay. Now, I believe it was Carol and I were talking about this a while ago. We come from a bunch of homes where we're the only children. Wayne was the only child of Ruby Ray Shotwell Hudson and Linwood Hudson. I was the only child of Willie Mae Cutts and Howard Isaac Cutts. Karen was the only child of Marion Cutts and Sybil. She's Sybil Morgan Shotwell Cutts, who later married Wayne Newton. So a lot of only children, only child in the family. The person that's going to be to your far right, I guess your far right, is Edwina Thatcher Shotwell. She was not married, and a very special person she was. We all loved her. Martha, talk about her. Stand up and talk about Edwina. Martha was very close to Edwina. Martha and Edwina were married, all very close. She loved us all, but I think there was a special.
Well, yeah, I don't think she loved Marion and I any differently than the rest of y'all. It was just that Marion and I had never had grandparents alive because Daddy's mother died 2 weeks before I was born. And I think Daddy was sort of like the baby to her and to his brother and sisters. But anyway, golly, Edwina has so many funny stories. I can't even.
A dry wit like you would not believe.
But she did. When Scott was born, she would have held that baby from sun up to sundown. She was so excited about having a baby. But she was more like my grandmother than an aunt. And this is kind of impromptu. I can't think of anything really good. Oh yeah, we did call her Erdy. I think Kay started that. Yeah, but Marion and I continued it. And Erdy, who knows? Where'd you get that? I don't know that much about. I will say, well, no, but I won't tell you. But when Erdy died, there appeared, so if any of you know where these flowers came from, you could take credit for it. Kay and I saw them sitting in the foyer at the funeral home. There were 2 red roses. And it just said, what did it say, Kay? Do you recall?
All my love or something.
Yeah, something that was it was a really good romantic story, and we just imagined, well, we really couldn't imagine, because I had never known Erdy to have a boyfriend or date anybody. Did you, Daddy? Apparently so.
He's not saying.
He wants me to stop rambling.
Okay, I'll take over more rambling. Okay, back to this picture. Now again, I want you to come up and take a look at this later. I'm going to put them out on the table here. But if you're on the bottom row now, the person that's on your far left is Karen's mother. She was Sybil Morgan Shotwell, who married Cutts. And Marion Cutts is what it was called. Marion Cutts, that's where Karen got her red hair from Marion Cutts. She had red hair. And then she later married Wayne Newton and was a very special person too. Everybody loves Sybil, and we miss her a lot. Sybil was born March the 6th, 1921. She died September the 4th, 2007. Mama and Ruby Ray Dunk, we called her Dunk. They were born September the 8th, 1918. Dunk passed away November the 30th, 2000. Wayne, is that right? Wayne, is that right?
Where do we get the names Dick and Dunk?
Did she pass away November the 30th, 2000?
Explain Dick and Dunk.
Okay. Okay. I don't know the nicknames. Mama was referred to sometimes as Dick, and Dunk was called that. I don't know where those names came from. Mama always told me that when Sybil was small, that they called her Bill.
You'll see
Well, I don't know about that.
You'll see his name in that for some reason.
Do what? Do what?
You'll see his name in that for some reason.
You're okay.
Okay. Oh,
Somebody named him
I didn't know that.
Freddie Ray.
Okay, and Mama passed away on August the 8th of 2009. And Edwina was born, she was the oldest. Edwina was the oldest, and then it was Mama and Dunk, and then it was Sybil, and then one I mentioned next, Jasper, and then Paul. Edwina passed away May the 3rd, 2002. And then Paul is in the middle seated with his legs crossed here. He's the baby of these 6 people. And he is Paul Judson Shotwell. And we do not know where the name Judson came from, right? He says it came from the Woodies. Woodies over here, speak up.
I don't know if it was
Jarvis is the Woody that married Aim Pink. Aim Pink, I'm going to mention her later. Okay, so they are and then it's Jasper. Jasper is on the bottom row and seated on your far right with his legs crossed over. And Jasper was also very special. And 3 of Jasper's children are here today, so once again, make yourself known, Jim. Jim, he's the baby. He always called himself the baby of Jasper's. Jenny Holt. Okay, Holt is from Chincoteague, Virginia. Beautiful place up there. Always sending me great pictures of the natural life up there. Okay, so these 6 children loved each other immensely. They all lived here in Stovall. They went to each other's house all the time, went into the house without having to knock. You just went in, you sat down sometimes and you had a meal, an impromptu meal. They just were so very, very close. Martha.
I just want to say one thing. This is definitely better than your mother and all Daddy's sisters. It never fails of that women. If Mama and Marion and I would go somewhere, Dad would not go. Never had to worry about Dad leaving. One of those
Yeah.
They knew they were going to have a call.
I can hear you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You might need to speed up.
If they knew you and the girl was gone, they were going to call and they wanted to know what I wanted.
Okay. Sorry, Mary Beth and Sam.
Y'all know what you're
Jasper had another child by the name of Ray that I mentioned earlier. Ray passed away some time back. He was the oldest of us grandchildren, and his 2 daughters are here today. Sandra, would you make yourself known?
from Rhode Island.
Sandra's from Rhode Island, came down from Rhode Island, and Mary Beth from South Carolina. And they brought, Mary Beth brought one of her children, and Sandra brought both of her children, right? Okay, so that takes care of them, Jasper.
And he was married to a Woody when Marilyn had her mother was a Woody.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, Marilyn Ray's wife was a Stovall, and Marilyn's mother was Mary Grace Woody. And I believe that Mary Grace's mother was named Mary Grace. And I believe that Mary Grace's mother was a Woody before she married a Woody. Uh-huh.
And weren't they 4 cousins?
I'm not sure
Was that
about
like
that.
saying we're Ray and Marilyn 4 cousins?
William Burnham was second cousin.
They were second cousins?
Yeah, well, I just introduced them. Okay, we're on this page that looks like this. Okay, with a blank model.
And Van, Mary Grace's, I guess, baby sister died just a couple
Yeah.
weeks ago.
Mary Grace's youngest sister, Zella Dew, just passed away a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
A few weeks ago, yeah. And I was just telling one of the Woodies to my left that just recently, Annie Catherine Stovall, one of the children of Mary Grace Stovall and Mara Stovall sent me a really nice 5 copies of the Woody family tree. It's a lot of folks on there, and I sent Karen one, I sent Fan one.
We had it out displayed today.
Okay, so that, and then I'm sure there have been some other Woody updates on that too. But on this next page, I think we talked about George Baker Shotwell, married Ellen Shanks, the 4 children. Janie Ethel Shotwell, she married a Tippett. His name was Frederick Alexander Tippett. And they lived down here in Vance County too. And they only had one child. Her name was Edith. And Edith married William Pittard. And they had one child. And I was thinking that he might be coming to the reunion here today. His name is Rick. Yeah.
He never called me back.
Never called you back. Okay, the next child of Taylor Shotwell and Emma Gold Morgan Shotwell is Emma Thornton. So she gets her name from her mother, Emma. And she married Jarvis Woody. And somebody was saying a while ago that Jarvis's middle name was Judson. Is that right? Jarvis Judson Woody? I never knew that. I just knew Jarvis Woody. But anyway, we called her Aunt Pink. And I don't know why. I would like to know, but I remember her just a little bit. She lived in Oxford. Well, they lived here in Stovall for a long time, didn't they, Paul?
They're gone.
Okay, well, they lived here in Stovall for a long time. And then they moved to Oxford. They had lots of kids, as you can see here. Penny, George, Walker, Marion Taylor, Baxter, Ava, Emmy Lou, and Judson. There's that Judson again. But Emmy Lou is the only one that I really knew. And Emmy Lou passed away not too long ago, I guess, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago maybe? And she married Bill Day, William Day. They lived over in Oxford. The next child of Taylor Shotwell and Emma Gold Shotwell is Mary Taylor Shotwell, and she was called, I think, Mamie. I'm not sure exactly why, but they called her Aunt Mamie. She married John Luther Woody. And they had lots of kids, as I understand. I think there were 11 children. Is that right, Tom? There were 11 children in the family. I've only got 2 here, and I made a note to see Tom Jordan or his dad, who are here today, to provide a complete list, because when I was putting this together, I couldn't get the rest of the children down. But I got Nita, who is Tom's grandmother. She married a Woody. And Tyree, is that right?
Tyree, Ruth.
Tyree, Ruth.
Dad help.
Dad help.
No.
Tyree, Ruth.
Let Tom get up there and talk.
Tom? Karen is showing some pictures now of what? Mary Taylor Shotwell Woody.
Okay, the children of Mary Taylor Shotwell Woody and John Luther Woody was the children of Mary Taylor Shotwell Woody and John Luther Woody was Ruth Fearson. I can't pronounce his name, but it's Juan, Janita. Juanita, Blanche, Emma, Jane, Julius, Mary, Rose, and Tyree, and Felix, and Carrie.
And we've got, y'all say what descendant you're from. But you're from Felix, right?
Yes. Yes, my father was named Felix Woody, Felix Shotwell Woody Jr., Felix Shotwell Woody, and he had a son that was a junior. And read 11 again. Huh. Let's see.
Karen, this is on that website. Can't they get this off the website? Because I got mine off.
You have to send an invitation. You have to send an invitation.
We'll send him an invitation. But Cam or Tom might have some comments too.
Okay, the children are Ruth Fearson, How you pronounce it?
Juanita.
Juanita.
Just say Nita.
Nita. Blanche, Emma, Janie, Julius, Mary, Rose, Tyree, Felix, and Carrie.
Now we have children of Rose here, right? Yes. Raise your hands, children of Rose.
Rose and Cam.
Okay, we got children of Rose over here, Rosemary, Joni. Where's Cam? Wherever he is.
Rosemary, John McRae.
My dad, Nita. Is that it?
Felix.
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 We already know you.
But his son is
Your son is here?
his family
Okay. Sean.
and grandson Bryson.
All right.
Woody's
Okay.
going to be going on.
That's right.
Maybe I better hurry up a little bit because it looks kind of threatening. There is one last child of Emma Gold Shotwell and Thomas Ladd, James Archibald Taylor Shotwell, and her name was Theodosia, which is sometimes spelled with a C, sometimes with an S. Ernest Shotwell. She married a guy called Charles Henry Clay Sr. They had these children, and I'm not 100% sure if this is a complete list. One was named Jesse Henry, and he married a woman that used to actually come here to Stovall to visit Edwina. And Patty Graves Clay and Laura Williamson Clay, whom I think died at childbirth. Turn the page quickly. Now, if you look up on the top of the next page, what I'm after now is a relationship between these two people up on the board, James Shotwell and Thomas Ladd Shotwell. I'm thinking that maybe this man at the very top, Archibald, was their, well, I know Archibald was Thomas Ladd Shotwell's daddy, but he was probably related to James Shotwell in some way. Should we continue or not?
Real dark.
Okay, okay. If you will look down at the very bottom of that page and onto the next page, you will see the descendants of Thomas Ladd Shotwell, and it's going back in time all the way to 1600. So you can just read that for yourself. But all of that information that's right there came from the work that Tom Jordan did on the from Ancestry.com, and it's very interesting. It goes back to England to an ancestor by the name of, I think his name was Jonathan.
Lloyd something. Lord.
It was Lord Jonathan Shotwell, born in 1600, died in 1688.
Was Lord a title?
Yeah, it says Lord as a title. Lord Jonathan Shotwell, born in 1600.
Okay.
All right, that gives you an overview.